Welcome to the Superintendent's Hangout, where we discuss topics in education, charter schools, life in general, and not necessarily in that order. I'm your host, Dr. Sharetta. Come on in and hang out. In this episode, I sat down with a dear friend of mine, Jeff Zlotnik. Jeff is director of the Dharma Bum Temple, which is a nonprofit in San Diego, California. And quoting from their website, Dharma Bum Temple is a home for the study and practice of Buddhism, yet we do not advocate one particular school of Buddhism. Our community is simply a bridge for people to learn how to make change within their own life and be of benefit to others. Dharma Bum Temple offers a wide range of courses and activities, including Introduction to Buddhism, meditation services, Dharma talks, homeless outreach, prison outreach, Dharma Bum Kids, Dharma Bum Teens, Dharma Bum Life Program, visiting monks, nuns, and Buddhist scholars, silent retreats, morning meditation, Buddhist classes in Spanish, Buddhism recovery program for overcoming addictions, and so much more. Jeff was instrumental in the founding of the nation's first and only Buddhist fraternity on the campus of the San Diego State University. That's a remarkable story in and of itself. And Jeff and I touch on a whole wide range of topics from his own life, his journey from being an angry teen to being an angry materialistic young man, to then discovering Buddhism, spending a year in a Taiwanese Buddhist monastery, and then what brought him back to the United States and ultimately into the work that led to the founding of the Dharma Bum Temple and its expansion. Jeff talks about his unique approach to fundraising, how he was able to raise significant amounts of money within a very, very short amount of time. Just to give you a little teaser, when Jeff and I first spoke about his desire to buy a church and convert it into a Buddhist temple and a home for the Dharma Bum Temple, he had $7,000 to his name, or I should say Dharma Bum Temple's name, and the property cost well over $1 million. And so he went through this remarkable, I call it his warrior monk phase, where he raised that money from hundreds and hundreds of small donations, really the ultimate epitome of grassroots involvement. Jeff and I touch on what it means to be kind and how kind does not have to mean weak. In fact, just the opposite, and much, much more. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did recording it. Welcome, Jeff. It's great to see you here and have you join us for the Superintendent's Hangout for a little bit.
Good to be here. Pleasure is all mine, my friend.
I was wondering if you could start out by telling us about yourself, your origin story, what brings you to the present moment.
The present moment. Yeah, so born in Chicago. Moved to San Diego when I was 4.
Cubs or White Sox?
Definitely the Cubbies. Won the World Series 2016, in case you hadn't heard.
After a short drought.
It's only 108 years.
I have a story about
details
about the Cubs World Series that I'll come back to in a minute.
All right, we'll hold that for later.
Yeah.
So 79, I was heartbroken as a 4-year-old, and we moved to San Diego. Mom, dad, 2 older brothers, moved to Del Cerro. Family's still there, same house my parents are in. But grew up here in San Diego. Patrick Henry kid. Went to college in Arizona, University of Arizona in Tucson. Was there in 1993, graduated in 97. Studied psychology and philosophy. While I was there, I was working in group homes, counseling adolescent females. So I'm 20 years old. These kids are 15, 16 years old. Group home, all of them have been physically, emotionally, sexually abused, pretty traumatic life. And I had been introduced to meditation really 2 ways. One was a book I had to read in Chinese civilization called Intro to Zen by D.T. Suzuki. And the other was a psychology professor said to me, Jeff, you're a pretty angry kid. You should try some meditation. So both these things happened really at the same time. And then I would show up to work with these kids. And I was 20 at the time. And we would kind of sit for 5 minutes, close our eyes, breathe, and then open our eyes, and the whole world seemed different. So that kind of started me on this really deep understanding of not even so much in my life, but just how much the meditation practice could impact people. So graduated college, did consulting for 7 years. As a nice Jewish kid, I thought if I, made a lot of money and bought a lot of stuff, I'd be perfectly happy. So made a lot of money, bought a lot of stuff, the houses, the cars, everything. And there I was, 25, 27, 28 years old, still pretty miserable, pretty depressed. And at that time, living downtown San Diego, and a good friend of mine, Kristen Shea, who I grew up with, had to observe a religious studies experience, something outside of her religion. And she said, "Hey, Jeff, you always talk about being Buddhist. You always say you're Buddhist, but you've never been to a temple. Do you want to go with me?" So 2003, went to this Buddhist temple with her on Park Boulevard, Shifeng Temple. And I remember walking in there and just everything, like, as soon as I sat down, all this weight kind of came off my shoulders. And I talked to the nun afterwards, said I'll be back tomorrow. 6 months go by. I didn't go back. I was out one night downtown San Diego and was at a club with my buddies, and I was waiting to get in line, and all of a sudden I realized that I was going to stand in line, spend a bunch of money, get us all in, get drunk, chase some girl around all night long, and I would wake up the next day and feel like crap. So it's exactly what happened. Continued the night, woke up the next day around noon, and said I got to go back to that temple. So that was 2003. I spent the next 2.5 years there pretty much every day. Built an English-speaking chapter at the temple. And then 2005, my master said, "You want to move to monastery in Taiwan?" So I ship off to Taiwan, February 05 to January 06. Lived Zen monk life. I wasn't a monk. I didn't ordain. I'd be a really bad monk, but spent 11 months in a monastery. And then came back, after living a life with no money, no wallet, no keys, no phone. It was really quite beautiful. And about 9 months in, my master said, "Jeff, how you doing?" And I said, "I'm great. I don't ever want to leave." And she said, "It's time for you to go." And I was like, "Well, I'm happy here. I don't want to go." And she said, "You got to go back to San Diego where you're from and figure out how to introduce what you've learned from this path and this practice to the people you know." So that was 2006. And for the last 17 years, that's been my life, is introducing meditation and this path to people who need it. So I'm sure we'll get into all that stuff as we go. But that kind of brings me up to 2006 when my journey with the meditation and everything really started.
Can you tell us a little bit about, I imagine the transition from being a highly paid but deeply unsatisfied, unhappy, and angry, as you describe it, consultant trying to solve life's problems with a bank account, but a lot of creature comforts. The transition from that to a monastery, and if you could talk to us about the realities of life, at least in that particular monastery in Taiwan.
Sure. I think that in many ways, like at the time, I didn't process how difficult it would be too much. But looking back on it, I'm sure there was something in me that thought it would be difficult to walk away from everything. When I was here, about 2 or 3 months after going to the temple, one of the nuns said, "Jeff, you work so hard to make so much money to buy so many things. If you didn't have so many things, you wouldn't need so much money. You wouldn't have to work so hard." So something in that mind, in that kind of idea really triggered and clicked in my mind. So I think leading up to moving to the monastery, I was kind of preparing myself all along the way I set this kind of objective of I went from making a lot of money and spending a lot of money to making no money and spending no money. So it got down to a point where I was living on about $1,000 a month, and that was it, from full-time to part-time. So when the time came, back to your question, to actually move to Taiwan, I feel like I'd kind of been preparing myself for that the whole way, so it didn't seem like this drastic change. And when I arrived, I really wasn't, there was nothing that I was resisting. In other words, I think, growing up an angry, depressed kid, lots of fights, lots of trouble, all that kind of stuff, I had been on this journey for quite a while now of trying to find a sense of peace and happiness, that when I finally got there, I was just all in. So I really I didn't have this feeling of I'm leaving anything or I have to get rid of anything. I was already mentally and emotionally prepared to have nothing. And so it was easy for me to have no money and have no keys and have no wallet and have no phone, as I said earlier, and just be present. And the day I arrived, one of the nuns, Buddhist nuns, said to me, "Jeff, never forget the original intention of why you're here. And I swear to this day, I don't know who she was. I'd never saw her again. I hadn't slept in 48 hours, so there's a good chance that maybe I just imagined.
Maybe that was in your head.
Yeah, I don't know. But I can vividly see her on the bottom of this mountain and said, never forget why you're here. Because she asked me who I was and what I was doing there, and I told her. And so I've used that as a reminder. And I think that teaching as well, again, to your question, that when I got there, there was nothing left in me that wanted to resist anything. I mean, as long as it wasn't, unsafe and healthy, I would have done pretty much anything they told me to do. So I really was all in. But in theory, you would think it would be difficult, even like eating. They just put food in front of you. Whatever's there, you eat. And whatever you get served, you have to eat all of it.
It's not a buffet.
It's not a buffet, right? You wake up at 4:30 in the morning. You've got 15 minutes to, as soon as there was a big board, like a wooden board that would hit, kind of Zen practice style, that woke you up, and you have 15 minutes, 4:30 to 4:45, to brush your teeth, right? You all have shaved heads, so you don't have to worry about your hair. Brush your teeth, put your robe on, splash some water on your face to kind of wake up, and get in line to go to morning meditation and chanting. So there was no time to think about anything. And that, for me, for someone who thought so much and tried to figure everything out, just that simple practice. I mean, think how much time we spend getting ready in the morning, right? Brushing the teeth, combing the hair, what clothes am I going to wear, what shoes am I going to put on? There's so much time that goes into that. And here's 15 minutes, and your day has started. So I really welcomed that drastic change. I just, whatever I was doing before wasn't working. And that's why for me it was a very welcoming change.
In 2006, the world was a lot bigger than it is now, right?
Yeah.
The internet was different, and you couldn't FaceTime people.
No.
And so how does a Western kid get integrated in? And I'm imagining, were the other people who were monks in training, were they from all around the world, or?
Sure.
How do you integrate into that? That seems like very
I definitely
curious.
stood out. I mean, the monastery itself, while it had very, very strict, rigid, traditional elements to it, like I lived in the male Buddhist college, and inside the college there were gates that kind of locked you in, and you weren't interacting with people. But when you left the college to go into the rest of the monastery, like if you flew to Taiwan right now and you asked them for the top 10 things to go see from a tourist perspective, this is one of the monasteries that they would send you to because it's so massive. I mean, the first day of Lunar New Year, even then, I think they were sleeping like 20,000 people on the monastery. So it's quite large. But to your point, when people saw me initially, I'm just, a foreigner. I'm a Western kid. I look obviously much different than there were people there from all over the world. But those that lived there as monks or nuns were predominantly from Taiwan, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand. So you had, 99% of the people there were from an Asian, an Asian population. And then there's this, Caucasian kid who shows up. And at first it's not that odd because of the tourists that come through there. But I remember about 2 or 3 months in, one of the monks saw me. I didn't know that well. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, you're still here." Almost as if surprised. So most Western people don't typically, and I don't necessarily mean this from an ego perspective, but they don't typically survive there that long because of, really back to your initial question, the creature comforts. We're not used to living without all this stuff.
You don't even sleep on a bed, right? It's like a mat.
It's a
on the
wooden
floor.
platform. Yeah.
My 52-year-old back just said,
It's a wooden platform. It's in the shape of a bed. It's more like
there are rocks in the shape of a bed.
Think
too.
of like a coffee table.
Okay.
A rectangular coffee table, and you had a real thin blanket. And I remember the logic amongst the monks was, if it was really warm, you slept on the blanket to give it a little bit of cushion. If it was cold, then you used the blanket to cover you. You just kind of picked which way you wanted to live. So it was rare for Western people to live in the Buddhist college and really have the experience that I was able to have. And they don't typically let people in unless really you plan on staying. And at that point, there was no determination of what my future would be. So they really made an exception for me.
And that's because you were kind of endorsed by someone in San Diego?
Correct. Coming from the temple here, I had been the president of the English-speaking chapter at the San Diego branch temple, and this was their home in Taiwan. And so I had a lot of relationships already built locally here in San Diego, and had some contact with some of the people in Taiwan as well. So, yes.
And then was it all conducted in English?
No.
No.
It was all in Mandarin. There were certain large events that if people came in from all over, they would have translation for. But for the most part, it was all in Mandarin. And it was a really fascinating thing because pretty early on, what I realized was, and I have terrible, I'd always worn contacts up to that point in my life since I was 13. But when I moved there, I brought glasses with me. But I was bringing them more as like a kind of a backup in case something happened with my contacts because I'm legally blind. I just can't see anything, like literally. And once that 15-minute morning period, once I learned about that, day one, that you have 15 minutes, I was like, well, I don't want to spend 2 or 3 minutes putting my contacts in and cleaning them, so I put my glasses on. So that was when I began to wear glasses every day, just out of simple ease. So there was a moment I was listening to a talk from the master, and I realized I couldn't understand what he was saying. And at that moment, I took my glasses off, and I couldn't see anything. So I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't see anything. And so for me, in my own little weird meditation way, I was just going to be present in the experience of being there with my breath and be at peace. So for a kid who grew up having to try to control everything, fix everything, win and dominate everything, I had to completely surrender control. Can't hear, can't see, just follow. Our room was probably smaller a little bit than, and even with these up, than what we're in right now. And there were 3 bunk beds. There were 6 of us living in this tiny little 10 by 10 room. And when they got up, I got up. When they put on the robe, I put on the robe. Sometimes they would tease me and start putting on the wrong robe, and so I would see them, and then I realized I was I was the new kid. It's like picking on the rookie.
Yeah.
And when they went to the bathroom, it was time to go to the bathroom. When they were we washed everything by hand. You only had 2 sets of the robes, so wash one, wear one, we used to say. So when they went to wash in a bucket on a washboard,
wow,
I went to wash. So you just follow, and that also kind of going even back to your question of how difficult was it? Just in our day-to-day lives, we have a hard time following, especially if you're used to being in charge and a leader and surrendering the ego and just saying, in many ways, I don't exist in the way that I think I exist. I'm just going to be quiet and follow. And again, of course, if it's healthy, if they all started to jump off a cliff, I wouldn't have done that. I would have put my glasses back on for that. But it was incredibly liberating. And that's why the practice has had such a deep impact. This is 18 years ago. So going back to that nun who said to me, never forget the original intention. I've also never forgotten those initial feelings I had when I was there. Wow, this is incredible. I have control of nothing, and I love it.
Did you learn Mandarin eventually?
Yeah, you pick up basic communication. It's funny because my tone is really good because I listened to it every day. So what I can say actually sounds like I know what I'm talking about.
You sound better than you might be.
Right. But my vocabulary is super limited. So if I just meet somebody, I can say basic things. And because I sound like I know what I'm talking about, they then start talking back to me. And I'm like, timbudong means I don't understand. But then they're really confused because I just spoke 3 sentences to them in what sounds like fluent Mandarin. Yeah.
Wow.
So my Mandarin is very basic, but not too bad for we say Waigoran for a foreigner.
So that was 18 years ago. You come back to San Diego. Bring us through the process of the founding, whether it was formal or organic, and the development of and the growth of the Dharma Bum Temple, where the name comes from, and kind of how that came about.
Sure. So one of my intentions, just very briefly, of moving to Taiwan and into the monastery was very much driven by the fact that what I saw at the local temple here, and this plays into the rationale for starting the Dharma Bum Temple, what I saw at the local Taiwanese temple here, which for me I loved, but I saw it as a hindrance and barrier to the average Western person who was interested in meditation and Buddhism. And what I mean by that is I called it a revolving door. And like those old, I know like in Chicago, big cities, they have them, especially where they're cold, New York, where you push those, I don't know if there's a name for those, but those glass doors.
Revolving door. They're heavy, right?
Yeah, and you go through like a big department store and those. So that's what the metaphor for that of what I used at the local temple here is that the average Western person interested in meditation, interested in Buddhism would show up at the temple here in San Diego. They would think it was cool, but there was a lot of bowing. There was a lot of chanting. There was the robes. There was the language. There was the heavy cultural component to it that made people kind of uncomfortable there. And so they didn't come back. And that's where the revolving door kind of metaphor comes in. And so one of my reasons for going to Taiwan was to figure out how do we introduce this stuff skillfully to local folks. So when then my master said, come back, I came back to the temple and I spent the next probably 3-4 months really trying to integrate what I learned there back here. But I saw really just a clash, meaning I didn't run the temple. I'm not a monk. I don't have any real authority or say. And the nun who was running the temple at the time was, it's very heavy ingrained in, the master was from mainland China, so it's very heavy Chinese culture. And us Western folks that were really trying to learn meditation and Buddhism, it didn't fit so well there. And I was very, I was going to say aggressive, which more maybe passionate about doing this. And I felt really kind of constricted within the temple, that I just couldn't do things the way I thought would work. So I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So we initially opened up a Dharma center in Golden Hill for another master who was with that organization for 15, 20 years. Also was raised here, but Taiwanese culture. And I found the same thing there. And it was I was at 25th and B, probably, you could hit a golf ball from here to there. Right. And so I ran that for about maybe 4 or 5 months. And now we're at the end of 2006. And what I saw there was I still felt like I had to follow the guidance, not so much the guidance, but I had to follow the rules is probably a better way to put it, of another master that wanted it done a certain way. And I realized it's just not going to work. So we had access to a place downtown, Second and Market, and a couple of us came together and said, look, we love Buddhism. We love meditation. We're young American kids. We're pretty foolish at times, still even at that stage. And into Bob Dylan, Jack Kerouac, let's just start our own thing. So end of 2006, we were sitting around and kind of talking about what would we call this place. And somebody said, how about the Dharma Bums, named after, or the Dharma Bum Center, named after Jack Kerouac's book, The Dharma Bums. So end of 2006, literally New Year's, going into 2007, we opened what at that time was called the Dharma Bum Center at 541 2nd Avenue, downtown San Diego. And we opened it with which, here we are 17 years later, and the mission and the objective and the agenda has never changed, which is also to me kind of fascinating that we've never shifted focus. The mission and focus from day one was introduce meditation and Buddhist practice from all different traditions of Buddhism and make it accessible to everybody, whatever race, whatever religion, whatever sexual orientation, whatever ability, whatever culture, whatever gender identity. Wherever you come from, whatever you believe in, just show up with all your madness, and we're going to help you find a sense of peace in your life. And that's been the mission for 17 years. And that was how it all started.
So I think I remember you telling me that it started in a house that you had bought. a condo or something, right?
It was a condo that we'll just say we had access to. We had easy access to it, definitely. Yeah. And then our budget for 10 years was, $30,000. All we did was pay rent on it. And
people lived there.
We had what we call Dharma Bums, and there were at any point in time probably 3 to 5 or 6 of us, and it changed over the 10 years, but somewhere in that range, anywhere from 3 to 6 of us. It was a super small space. I mean, the whole downtown temple was only like 1,100 square feet, and you entered on the main floor, which had you almost walked into kind of a living / kitchen area. Had a little front room by the window, and then it had these stairs that went up to a loft. And the loft is what we turned into the meditation area, but super small. So we all kind of just lived on the floor. And we had this long closet hallway that various, Dharma Bums lived in over the years. But we were kind of just Dharma Bums crashing on the floor. At one point in time, we did enclose the back area, so we had a little bit of a private room. But man, what an adventure. I mean, just still mind blowing, that whole experience down there. And the fact that we survived is even crazier, that, we lived through it all. We did beautiful work, and that what we evolved to today, the fact that we kept it going long enough to get to where we are now is still just, it just blows my mind.
So where are you today? And you're humble about the adventure of it, but it's pretty remarkable, the current facility of DBT and everything. And maybe you can walk us through the retail store. I think there were 2 retail stores, 2 retail store locations now, or one migrated, or maybe you can talk.
Oh, 2 different locations.
Right?
Yeah. So let's see. So we opened the Dharma Bum Temple downtown, end of 2006, going into 2007. 2 years later, there was a guy by the name of Alfred Barron, and he had opened up about 20 years ago now a Buddhist shop in the college area, San Diego State area, on Elkhorn Boulevard, called Buddha for You. He was an old American kid, Jewish guy. His wife was from Thailand, and he opened up this Buddhist shop. So we were customers there. If you wanted a Buddhist statue, there were only a couple places to go. And so that's one of the places you would have gone to get, your Buddhist stuff. So when we opened the temple, that's where we got our Buddhist statue. That was where we got our tapestries. That's where we got our stuff. And 2009, he sends me an email and says, Jeff, Buddha for You is going to close. And if you don't take it, it's done. So, and I'm thinking we're 2 years into running this Buddhist temple. I've gone from my consulting life and making all the money to making no money and living on the floor to downtown Buddhist temple, living on muffins and scones and bagels that we picked up from It's a Grind that were donated every day, which that's actually how our food distribution program started.
At the end of the day, they need to get rid of it, right?
At the end of the day, they need to get rid of everything. So we literally lived on scones at, night and muffins and bagels in the morning. Definitely not the healthiest way, but we were kind of, we were committed to it. So anyways, we're 2 years into that life, and I get this email. And my first thought was I don't want a retail shop. I don't want to sell Buddhist stuff. I'm just completely not interested, right? And Alfred, the thing about Alfred, I mean, the guy, the shirt you're wearing that I'm sure you probably bought, he could sell it to you 3 times.
Right.
He was.
In fact, he did.
He did. Yes. He could. He was a sales guy, and he could sell anything. But he did love the Buddhist stuff. His wife was from Thailand, so it was important to him as well. But I get this email, and I turn to Maggie, and I said, what do you think we should do? And Maggie, we were at that time a couple years in of really running the temple together. And I said, what do you think we should do? And she said, we should take it. And we talked about it, and we realized, and I'll kind of tie this together in a minute, but we realized that if we could take this crazy Buddhist store and we could do a couple things. One, if it actually ever made money, if we could use it to help support the temple. Because for us, as a Buddhist practitioner, you're looking at right livelihood without getting into that whole teaching too much. You get into right livelihood and you have to be comfortable with how you're generating revenue and making money. So if we were now going to get into the business of running a Buddhist store, we had to be comfortable with it and had to align with our practices and beliefs in running a temple. So we said if we could use the store to make money, to support temple, we were okay with that. We felt good with that. If we could use the store to share the teachings of meditation and Buddhism, we were okay with that. And so these things, they all kind of seemed possible, right? So we show up. Alfred had already moved away. The stepson was running it. He had no interest in it. We had zero retail experience, zero retail knowledge. The stepson showed us the ropes. Like, we would go there. He was just sitting there playing video games. And he showed us the ropes for like 6 days. And then he left. He handed us the keys and said goodbye. So there we are with this retail store in San Diego State. So we ran it there for a year. We immediately started holding classes.
I think that's right about the time that you and I met.
Okay, that was in 2009.
Right.
So this was, 14 years ago. And we started holding classes. People showed up. We initially were holding classes in like the little corner area of the store, but we outgrew it. So the back of the store was an old restaurant initially. So it had a huge kitchen area in the back that was storage. So we tore all that out. We turned it into a meditation hall. And we were packing people in there twice a week for classes. So at this time, we're running the downtown temple and the Buddha for You store with classes. After about a year, we were just dying. We couldn't pay. We were dying in there financially. You couldn't even pay the rent. He didn't give it to us. We worked out a purchase price that we paid off over a handful of years. So we still owed him money for the inventory. And there was just nothing coming in. So about a year in, we met. His name was Paul Russo, his family, and they owned he was president of the College Area Business District at that time, and they owned a lot of properties, and one of them was the Vons Plaza, which is pretty well known in San Diego. It's kind of the San Diego State Campus Plaza, College and Oakland Boulevard. And we met with him to see what he had ideas on, and he said, hey, I got a space right next to Vons. If you want to move Buddha for You there, you can rent a space in the mall. So we decided to do it.
That was an old Starbucks, I think.
It was initially a Starbucks. Yeah, it was a Starbucks between Vons and ITAN, tanning salon. And there's a Starbucks. It was empty for about 2 years and before we moved in. So we decide this was kind of a fun thing, but a funny idea. We had to figure out how we're going to move all this stuff. We got 1,000 square foot of Buddha statues. So we did a pilgrimage. And we had, 150 people come out, and we walked Buddhist statues. We had a Tibetan Lama come and lead us, and we chanted Om Mani Padme Hum, which is a compassion mantra to bring compassion into the world. And we chanted strutting Buddhist statues up and down Oakland Boulevard all day long. Now, people could have shown up and grabbed a Buddhist statue, put it in their car, and left. We wouldn't have known. But to this day, I'm pretty sure most of the statues made it into the store. So we move into that location.
It's a creative way to get free labor.
A creative way to generate a beautiful labor activity, yes. And so the news came out. They covered it. It was in the newspaper, So it was a lot of fun. We move everything in. We open up a couple days later. And that was 2010. And this is really where the college group was kind of built, because you get all these college kids coming to Vons and going to ITAN and Woodstock Pizza and Tapioca Express and getting their boba and their Yogurtland and Thai food. And it's a big shopping plaza. So college kids were coming in, and the sign said free meditation. So we started to draw college kids to the meditation classes. And we were there, again, about 2010. And around 2015, I said to a couple of the college kids, we should start a Buddhist group at San Diego State. And that's where Delta Beta Tau really comes into play. That's the nation's first and only co-ed Buddhist fraternity at San Diego State University that we founded September 2015. And that was really birthed because of the college kids that were coming to meditation classes. So 2010 to 2015, we've got the downtown temple still running. Classes every night, every morning, prison outreach, homeless outreach, everything there. Now we're running Buddha for You. We're 6 years into running this store with the meditation classes there. And now we've started the college group at San Diego State. And that gets us to 2015.
So I can't think of...
That's a lot. So I'll pause there.
I can't think of too many ideas or concepts that are farther apart from each other than university / fraternity and in the United States and Buddhism.
Right. Correct. Two completely opposite things.
This is coming from a former fraternity president. And
myself as well.
Full candor, it was not a Buddhist fraternity.
Yes. Neither was mine.
In no way, shape, or form.
Yes.
So how do you get those two together? And as I understand it, you have a waiting list now for Delta Beta Tau. Mm-hmm. And how does that work?
It was interesting because one of the early on, one of the students, and it was Caitlin Leary, she wrote for the Daily Aztec, and she asked if she could interview me for a story. So I said, of course. And one of the things that I remember saying to her at the time was that for me, introducing Buddhist practice meditation to college kids, just like the Dharma Bum Temple, but we're focusing on the college kids for a moment, it wasn't about making these kids Buddhist. It wasn't about, setting them up to live some pure life. These are San Diego State college kids. They're going to do whatever they're going to do at San Diego State. And whether they're in a traditional Greek, fraternity sorority, or whether they're a part of Delta Beta Tau, they're still going to be college kids. And my intention with a group from the beginning wasn't just to alter their life at that moment. It was really about what we call planting the seed that later on in their life, and now, again, maybe we'll get to it, maybe not, but now we have this incredible alumni group because now we're 7 years, we're starting year 8 coming up. So now we have a Delta Beta Tau alumni group.
Who are adults. And
they're 25 years old, and they're still gathering and meeting. And I knew in 2015, in my mind, again, I'm kind of digressing a minute here, but that this fraternity would have 3 phases to it, right? I'm a big sports guy, so I think of like football. You think of, offense, defense, and special teams, right? It's 3 phases. We have a pledge program, we have an active chapter program, and we have an alumni. And going back to where I started to say is that from that initial interview with Caitlin, I remember saying this isn't just about changing their college experience. This is about giving them tools of kindness and compassion and generosity and morality and patience that they're going to need and want to use the rest of their life. So when we started it, we really built it as a way to, we even looked at the name Delta Beta Tau, Delta change, to kind of a change. Beta is like a test. And Tao, the Tao is the way.
The way.
Right. And so Tao was kind of a play on that word because it's spelled T-A-O.
Also conveniently DBT, right?
DBT, right. Dharma Bum Temple. Right. It usually takes the kids about a year in to figure that out. But, and going back to give love to I was a beta at University of Arizona, Beta Theta Pi, and we were the Delta Beta chapter of, Beta Theta Pi at U of A. So I kind of personally threw some, little fun twists in there. But for me, just having fun with the whole thing. And so we really wanted to challenge, yes, we understand the Greek system has a terrible reputation, obviously so, and rightfully so for a lot of things they do. But that doesn't mean that we can't bring something into kind of a traditional fraternity setup and create a space for kids to be vulnerable and honest and open about their experiences in life. So instead of, and we started to get a lot of people from traditional fraternities and sororities. That's what was fascinating to us is these were kids coming from your traditional, well-known fraternities and sororities that when they get together there, they're drinking beer, they're smoking pot, they're, living that life. And when they would come to Delta Beta Tau, it was an opportunity to actually talk about something completely different. I mean, to listen to a group of 5 frat guys talk about their emotions and what it's like to be a college kid, that's revolutionary. So that's the space that we were creating is we knew it was completely different from what the college was used to. And in fact, when Caitlin ran that article in the Daily Aztec, Gary Worth, who's a writer for the San Diego Union Tribune, an alum from San Diego State, he saw it. He contacted me and he says, hey, I'd love to run a story on this. We did an interview. Next thing you know, Union Tribune does a story about the first ever fraternity, Buddhist fraternity, coming to San Diego State. The only catch was this was all before it really existed. This was in the kind of planning stage. So then the university got wind of a fraternity that was coming to San Diego State University, but they knew nothing about it. So I set up a meeting with the dean of students and the assistant dean, and I said, hey, I'm Jeff. First off, I want to apologize. I'm the one who's behind this, and I'm sorry that you're hearing about it from the media first and not from, me or us. And I never forget, he said to me, Jeff, almost everything in the newspaper about students at San Diego State is never positive. He said,
and certainly about fraternities.
Certainly about fraternities, right? Maybe he even said that. I don't remember his exact words, and he said, and I'm not really sure what you're going to do with our students, but if you're going to help them be calm and peaceful and focused and teach them some skills that will help them in their lives, we support you. And so they didn't quite understand what we were going to do yet. And honestly, I wasn't sure how it all would roll out yet, but we knew the intention of it. And so we had their support from day one. And again, that was, coming up on 8 years ago.
So my very surface level understanding of Buddhism is it has guiding principles and precepts, but not necessarily super hard rules.
Correct.
How do you handle the inevitable 18 to 22-year-old behaviors in a fraternity, and where's the guidance for the behavior in a fraternity house or at activities, or is it a substance-free environment?
Yes.
How does this all come together?
I know it's really confusing. So a couple things just to clarify, like very specific details. Technically, we are registered as a registered student organization. Because we're set up as a co-ed organization, we actually don't even fit into the IFC, Interfraternity Council, or Panhellenic. So through the university, we are what they call an RSO, Registered Student Organization. And that actually gives us a little more freedom to do what we want. And it allows us to be co-ed as we are. And there's some other things there. Second, we do not have a house. Okay. We will never have a house.
Okay.
I made it
by design.
By design. I made it very clear from the get-go. People would ask that all the time, that the last thing I want to do, for the reasons that we all understand, is put a bunch of 18 to 20-year-old college kids in a house living together under Buddhist guidelines, because it just won't work, right? So for safety, protection, wisdom, I don't want a house with a bunch of college kids living together under the name of Delta Beta Tau. What I do see us having in the future, and I'm sure we'll get to the current Dharma Bum Temple, is a center, a temple, a facility, a community center, whatever you want to call it, on campus, just like the Dharma Bum Temple.
Just non-residential.
Non-residential, just like Hillel is. To me, Hillel of San Diego is our model. They're a perfect model as a 501c3 nonprofit organization that has a building. They have the Women's Resource Center at San Diego State. You have the Black Resource Center at San Diego State. You have Hillel of San Diego. So you have these separate organizations that do wonderful work, but they're not traditional fraternity houses or sorority houses that people live in. That's our model. Back to the substance question. Yes, all of our events are substance-free. All the students, as pledges, sign a code of conduct that states they will not use any substances, no drugs, no alcohol, anything at any of our events. We have camping retreats that they go on every semester. And there's a separate code of conduct policy that they must sign before they go camping as well. So it's very strict, zero tolerance. Now, what that means is we're not controlling how they live their lives. Nobody can control how anyone live their lives, right? What they're doing outside of Delta Beta Tau time, like any other college student, is their own. But when they are involved in a Delta Beta Tau activity, it is zero tolerance, no drugs, no alcohol.
What about the sex question?
Yeah, so the another reason we don't want a house, right? And again, not that you need a house for that, but the reality is, going back to your question about kind of the guidelines and the rules, in Buddhism we call them precepts.
Right. Okay.
And
I was searching for that word.
One of my favorite conversations with them every semester is introducing them to the 5 precepts. And without getting into them too much right now, They are to refrain from lying, to refrain from harming, to refrain from stealing, to refrain from sexual misconduct, and to refrain from intoxicants or anything that alters the state of mind, right? Lying, harming, or killing, stealing, intoxicants, sexual misconduct pretty much sums up most college kids' experience for 4 years. And yet here we are introducing these teachings. So back to your question, how does this work? This conversation is the greatest. It's my favorite thing to have with them, because here's what it does. It is not punishing them. It is not telling them they're going to hell because they got drunk and had sex. It is not setting them up to feel like they're terrible human beings because they lied to somebody. What these questions do, and when I lead this discussion with them, is the way it's posed to them is, say, any of them really, but just say lying, for example. If you lie, when do you lie? How do you lie? Why do you lie? How does the lying impact your life and the life of those around you? If you use intoxicants, if you drink beer, if you smoke pot, if you use other drugs, when do you do it? Why do you do it? How does it impact your life and the life of those around you? So what this actually does is it gets 18 to 22-year-old kids talking about
and reflecting
on why they do these things. This is so important, not just for youth, but for everybody, really. If people can understand that, hey, the reason, I'll never forget this one kid, I'll leave names out to protect the innocent, but I'll never forget this one kid who had terrible migraines. And or his story was about how when he was in high school, he had terrible migraines. And we were having the precept talk. And he said that when he was in high school, his doctor gave him some pretty heavy prescription, narcotic drugs to take care of his migraine headaches. And then he went on a weekend away with some high school friends somewhere, and he smoked marijuana for the first time. And he said all of a sudden his migraines went away. And this was like 3 years prior, 2 or 3 years prior. And so instead of taking the prescription medication, he just started smoking pot. So the conversation continued, and then I went back to him and I said, how often do you smoke pot now? He said, every day. I said, do you get migraines every day? He says, no. I said, do you smoke pot when you wake up? Yes. Do you get migraines in the morning when you wake up? Is that why you smoke? No. So I had him actually explore that what he was initially doing as for him, a medicinal purpose to take care of his migraine became a habitual pattern and behavior that he was now addicted and stuck in. And I have these kids explore, if you're getting drunk every night, why? What are you running from? What are you escaping from? What's your addiction? Where's your depression? Where's your anxiety? What is leading you to do these things? And when you can open up this dialogue with, 50 college kids and they can be honest and vulnerable with each other, it's incredible. It's simply beautiful. So that's how we approach it, in brief.
I also think it's a commentary on, and maybe I'm generalizing, but I think it's a positive commentary on college students in the 21st century.
Yeah.
That there's a different level of desire to be reflective and to perhaps at least explore some different paths. Mm-hmm. I don't think a Buddhist fraternity would have succeeded when I was in college,
right.
Certainly where I went to college.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good thing. I think if my daughter, her college does not have Greek organizations, and as you made the distinction, it's technically not a Greek organization,
but it functions in the same manner.
But if there were any such organizations that she might be involved with, it would be something like what you're describing, which is really to deepen students' ability to reflect and see where their place in their own lives is and what areas they can perhaps get better or change and just be a better person in society.
Definitely. I mean, we had I'll make it a shorter story because there's a lot of elements to it, but there were 3 guys a couple years ago that were very traditional fraternity guys. They came from that background, and
Toga.
Yeah, exactly. And they both pledged, or all three of them, pledged Delta Beta Tau. They went through it. They had a great experience. And then either the next semester or following semester, the three of them wanted to be pledge educators. And the pledge educator is the one who runs the lives of the pledge class for a semester. And the pledge class are the new people coming through for the first time. And we had always had a mix, of kind of genders as pledge eds. It wasn't going to be three guys. It wasn't going to be three girls. We wanted a mix. And these three guys wanted to do it together. And I and a couple other the elder leaders were kind of adamant about not, and they were pulling their traditional, brotherhood, and they're like, you either get all of us or you get none of us, And the truth was they had a lot of experience with leading a pledge program. So they brought in a lot of skills that were incredibly tangible and really beautiful to be able to build our pledge program that we didn't have at this point in time. The downside was I personally was really concerned about three fraternity guys leading this group, which, was still probably about 70%, female. And I actually asked one of the officers to go talk to them and tell them that we can't have all three of them. And they said, and then Ben came back in and he said, I couldn't do it, Jeff. It's either all three of them or not. So then I went to talk to him and I said, tell me why. And I remember Isaac said to me, I want to show people that we are different from the perception that everybody has of us. And we want to show people that three traditional frat guys from a very well-known and not good reputation fraternity on campus can also do good things and lead people with respect. And to this day, those three guys, Isaac, Jake, and Morgan, completely transformed and built our pledge program and had so many younger students look up to them, rightfully so. So it was beautiful.
In thinking about Buddhism, and in the 2023 in California, pretty politically liberal state, socially liberal in a lot of ways. I was just thinking, I flashed on the idea if you had opened a Christian, I don't know what the word, retail store where you sold crosses and Bibles, you're probably not going to get random students from San Diego State walking in and then deciding to stay and chat and then come on a Friday night. And this is no casting aspersions towards Christianity, but I just don't think that's the reality of most college environments that tend to be liberal and really pretty secular.
Right.
What is it about Buddhism? Mm-hmm. And also, how do you bridge that gap between a secular world, these kids, when they're not involved in a DBT activity, they're in a world that doesn't really have strong religious underpinnings, certainly for that age group. Mm-hmm. How do you span that so that you've got kids being serious about the precepts, for example? And what is it about Buddhism, perhaps, that can span that?
I think that, just Buddhism in general, the average person, and this obviously is my very narrow-minded, limited view, but the average person, say California or even around the country, in 2023, when they think of Buddhism, the general view is it's a peaceful thing. A lot of people don't know what it is. Even you go to like other parts of the country that maybe not know what it is. My belief is that most people, without knowing anything about it, they think it's a peaceful thing.
Which is interesting because politically and around the world, that's not always the case.
What's
that? That the manifestation, well, I should say, you see countries that are majority Buddhist, but involved in wars.
Right. Understood. Yes. Absolutely. So
it's an
there is that
interesting interpretation, right?
And I think that the image of monks and nuns, it's what really the first and main thing to your question, the short answer is meditation. What people see in Buddhism is there's the peaceful side to it, and it's because of the meditation practice. I think that's a very general beginner's mind view of what a college kid, right, would be drawn to. And all the kids, same as Dharma Bum Temple, Delta Beta Tau, the kids that join it are not Buddhist. We're not trying to make them Buddhist. They don't get like there's no formal ritual at the end where they get a certificate and we've like converted them.
You don't get a black belt.
Yeah, you don't get
a rising sun on it.
Right? You haven't been converted. You don't become Buddhist. I always say at the temple, we're not, the people here are not Buddhist. We're not trying to make you Buddhist, and you're not going to leave Buddhist. And so Delta Beta Tau is that same thing. And I think I really give tremendous credit to the students who, while I led it really the first 3-4 years and mentored others, the students create a safe space. I mean, all our meetings are in a circle, so the idea of a circle is really beautiful to do, that kind of community gathering. But the students have created a space where those who are there understand that it doesn't matter what religion or spiritual beliefs they have or don't have, that they're not actually there to become Buddhist. They're just there to be kinder, gentler, happier people. And the concept of, can we be kinder today to ourselves and others than we were yesterday? If you're Catholic, that's still a beautiful idea. If you're Christian, if you're Muslim, if you're Jewish, if you're pagan, whatever religion you are, if you work on being kind and compassionate to yourself and others, that's a beautiful thing. So I think the message, even though it's a Buddhist fraternity and we look at Buddhist teachings, when you're in the room and you're in that space and you listen to students share, they're not talking religion. They're not talking politics. Even the temple, our kind of 2 rules are we don't talk religion, we don't talk politics, because those are the 2 main things that divides everybody. So if we can set all of that aside, and, one example from years ago is somebody who was Catholic. When she started to learn about Buddhism, she said it actually brought her closer to her Catholic faith, meaning her religious views around Catholicism were incredibly important. When she learned about Buddhism and meditation, it made her happier, it made her kinder, it made her gentler, which she felt brought her closer to her God. And I always saw that as a beautiful example. She called it a software upgrade, that the Buddhist teachings were just helping her as an individual. And whatever her beliefs are, that's great. That kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
So the secular part is that the reason I see it as really a kind of a meshing of this kind of religious and secular world is that you're not bringing the religion into it. You're bringing the philosophy, and that's always the endless debate, is Buddhism or religion or philosophy. But you're bringing the philosophy of the Buddhist teachings, and he was just a human, just a dude, wasn't a god. So you're bringing his philosophy into your everyday life. So you're not even, in some ways, you're not even trying to merge religion and secular affairs. They all just kind of fall away, if that makes sense. It's like reading any sort of philosophy and adopting it, but you don't have to alter the rest of your religious views.
So let's jump ahead to the desire to expand or I should say, to move the headquarters, for lack of a better term, the mothership of DBT, the temple, and your journey to finding a facility and raising money, and then to where you are in 2023, because it's been quite remarkable.
Sure. Yeah, so kind of back timeline-wise, we kind of paused at 2015. We have the downtown temple, 1,000 square feet. We have Buddha for You, about 1,000 square feet with the meditation. And we have the college group at San Diego State. And at that time, the college group was actually using the Buddha for You meditation hall for its meetings. So that was kind of a cool thing. But we have these 2 locations and really 3 kind of major, pieces. We had for many years been looking for a space that could really bring everything under one roof. And in 2016, Alex, who was one of our board members at the time, sent me a link and said, "Hey, Jeff, there's an old church for sale." And he sends me this link. And, Alex himself would always drive around. Maggie and I had looked at some other places. We actually almost pursued a property down in Old Town. I don't even know if I ever told you about that, but we almost tried to move on a property in Old Town a few years earlier and actually never did. But So we'd always kind of kept our eyes and ears open to something that might pop up. Alex sends a link. I actually waited a bit of time till I went and even saw it. I think the email sat in my inbox for I saw it, like the email, and then I think it sat there for 2 months. And then one day I just said, I'm going to drive by and take a look at it. And it was behind the Board of Education building, University Heights, and I see this cool old white church on a corner. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But from the outside, you can't really, you don't get a great sense of it. So Maggie and I set up a time with a realtor and went and looked at it. And timing-wise, this is around August of 2016. And as soon as we walked in the front doors, and the church, it was an old Swedenborgian church, Christian mystic from the 1700s, Emanuel Swedenborg. This was their congregation. It was built in 1927. And they had really dwindled down to maybe 5-7 people. So they stopped operating. They put it on the market. When Maggie and I walk in, it just the feeling that it has now today, that feeling was the same when we walked into it. It was boarded up. It was kind of musty. It hadn't been opened. And there was just no air in there. But it felt great. So we kind of made the decision then we wanted to get it. And we called a kind of an emergency board meeting. And we met outside the temple that night. Or, not that night, but maybe a few nights later. And I shared with everybody that we wanted to try to buy this building. And we weren't even inside it. We were it was nighttime and we were on the corner looking at it. And I kind of shared, the vision of what we could do here and put everything under one roof. And the board was all in. So contacted a, good buddy of mine's a commercial real estate broker. And
I must say, you emailed me and I said, how much money do you have? And you said $7,000.
So was that you? I always thought that was John. I tell that story. I was getting there, but I thought I told that to John, not you.
Well, you might have told it to both of us.
Okay.
Because I remember you saying, hey, I'm in contact with a realtor. I go, hey, how much money do you have? $7K.
Yeah.
I thought this guy's nuts.
Yeah. So, and so that's literally to me, that's the diving board for this story is when I got connected to John Jarvis, which was through you, and connected with John and to him and you. So the property was a $1.4 million, listing. And I remember my first conversation with John and same thing. He said, well, how much? Maybe this conversation was with you then. Maybe all these years I've been saying it was John. Maybe it was with you. But I remember someone saying to me, how much money do you have? And I said, we have 7.
Yeah. So your down payment is 0.05%.
Right. And I said, we have 7. And the response was 7 million? I said, no, 7,000.
700 grand?
Yeah.
No,
and you got to understand, at that point, Dharma Bum what I call Dharma Bum dollars, $7,000, that was we'd never had $7,000 in our account. This is 10 years into Dharma Bum Temple. Our rent's paid for, we could actually buy a muffin and scone now, and we got $7,000. So we're sitting pretty, right, with $7,000. So, and I remember talking with John and saying, he wrote a couple offers, and he said, if they accept it, and the first offers were pretty low. I think we went at $750,000, $900,000, and the church eventually got back to us. And we wrote them a nice letter, said, look, we'll leave the cross up. We'll honor the Swedenborgian tradition. We'll leave all your plaques up, all these beautiful things. We want to keep it around. The key point was that the building was never registered historic. So you have a 1927 building, at this time is about 90 years old, that developers had offers in on, and they were going to tear it down, turn it into condos. And again, this is, 4144 Campus Avenue in University Heights, Board of Education, right off Washington. It's a, pretty well-known building, and it is 6,300 square feet. And so when they told us if you match developers' offers, you could have it, that was when I remember the conversation of saying, hey, if we put this offer in and they accept it, you're going to have to open escrow. And you're going to need more than $7,000. I said, well, how much are we going to need? And he said, well, if you don't open with $100,000, they're not going to take you seriously. And I said, well, okay, how long will we have to get $100,000? He said, you have 2 weeks, give or take. Otherwise, they're going to start getting nervous, So I said, put in the offer. And I remember saying, Jeff, you've got $7,000. I said, we'll get the money, put in the offer. Puts in the offer. It was accepted, all right, 1.4. They wouldn't give us a break. They wouldn't take off 200,000 because
no Buddhist discount.
No Buddhist discount. They were gonna, but we could have it over developers. And in all due respect, the local Reverend Jonathan, he was the Reverend at the time for 7 years, super instrumental in helping us convince the international organization to let the Dharma Bums have it. So he played a huge role in this. He always led us in the space, stuff like that. Anyways, so we opened up a fundraising campaign. We'd never done a fundraising campaign ever in our 10, now 11-year history, Dharma Bum Temple. And we opened up fundraising campaign, and in the first 14 days, we raised $103,800 from 321 donors to open escrow. And I still, to this day, I remember writing the check to Chicago Title, driving up to the Mission Valley, walking in there with I had a $100,000 check in my hand to Chicago Title for this property. And the cute thing was, not that I'm some savvy real estate guy, but for those who know nothing about real estate, when I announced that we opened escrow, through social media, most people thought that that meant we bought the building, and I was like, no, we're on the dance floor now, we just they're going to let us dance. Right. That's it. So we opened escrow, and, again, for those who don't know anything about escrow, it's a period of time that you have to go through all your contingencies and check out the, property, make sure it's safe and all those things, do your due diligence. But then you have to fund your escrow account with all the money for closing. Now, the interesting thing here is that banks are considered high risk. Churches are considered high risk to banks, because I learned through this process that their common theme in that industry is they say they won't foreclose on God. Meaning, if a church can't pay their mortgage, the bank's not going to take it from them.
No, they don't like that.
Because it makes them look bad, right? Again, I can't, I don't want to speak for too many people, but that was the message that was shared with me.
I've heard that too.
And so what that meant was that we had to come up with a 35% down payment. So 1.4, 35% down is $490,000. So while we raised that first $100,000, we were still $390,000 away. The interesting thing here, which I sometimes skip over, but I'll just say it briefly, is that we had a bank. Now, we have no history of financial success for 10, 11 years. Like I said, $30,000 budget downtown, running the Buddhist store. You can only imagine how much money a Buddhist store is making. And so for a bank to give us a $1 million loan, it's pretty much a 0% chance of that happening. But we found a bank, and they said, we'll do the loan if you raise the 35%, the $500,000, and if you get 3 guarantors. And we'll do it. So started the fundraising. One fun thing I love, Ken St. Pierre was our board president at the time, and I remember calling him to ask him if he would be one of our guarantors. And he says, Jeff, what's the worst thing that could happen if we get this and I'm a guarantor? He says, well, the worst thing that could happen is if we default on the loan and we can't pay it, you and the other 2 guarantors, it's now your responsibility and you own the church. And his response was, that's all right. I've always wanted to live in an old church. So that was kind of the love that we had from the community. So went to work. And during this campaign, to kind of jump ahead to the end of it, one more piece. I'll finish with because I know you this is a kind of a pretty miraculous journey. We ended up in 108 days, we raised $498,777 from 1,123 donors. We had all the money we needed. We were $160,000 away. We had 330, and we were $160,000 away. And I met with a dear friend of mine, wonderful individual, big developer here in San Diego. And he said, Jeff, how much you need? And I said, well, we're 160 away. And he said, I'll match it. If you go get 80, I'll give you the final 80. So we had our 490, we had our 3 guarantors, went back to the bank, and they went to put it through underwriting. They said, sorry, we can't do it. They backed out. So there we were, stuck in escrow, have the funds. So we were able to, we had a dear friend from the community, and we were able to really structure it with him where he helped us close the deal. And we moved in April 14th of 2017. We closed on the property. We moved in 3 days later. April 17th, 2017. So it was, the cool thing about it was the newspaper got into it, right? They ran a couple stories in the Tribune. I did a beautiful interview, beautiful on his part, with Paul Rudy, who was the sports guy at KUSI, who used to come to meditation. And when he heard that KUSI was doing this story, got so amped up. And so we did this beautiful interview. And he told me in his 30 years of broadcasting, he'd never been nervous before an interview. Like, he spent his whole life like this. I mean, he spent 30 years interviewing and talking with people. And he said he'd never felt nervous in his life until this interview, because it meant something to him. He was a part of the meditation world with us, and he knew that we had a chance to reach all his listeners. So Paul Rudy was huge. The KUSI interview was huge. The newspaper was huge. The 1,123 people were huge. Our dear friend Dean Oliver was huge. You were huge. Everybody that got behind this, the University Heights neighborhood, they didn't know who we were. The University Heights Community Association didn't know who we were. But they knew that we were trying to say, in their minds, trying to come in, which meant save their old building from being torn down. So they got behind us, ran some articles on us, some interviews. And that 108 days was, to this day, the most intense 108 days of my life. And I call it what I called my bodhisattva practice, of putting all these teachings, generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom, from 6 a.m. till pretty much midnight, 108 days straight. I was insane. I just became like a machine.
Warrior monk mode.
Yeah, it was warrior monk mode. It was phenomenal. Yeah, and the community that supported it, that's why, I get it. I drove it. I led it. But, without 1,123 people, none of it gets done.
I remember conversations with you where you were, I think, walking on a treadmill.
Yeah.
Like eating one meal a day to be lean and mean, and just working the phones and social media relentlessly.
Yeah, it's all, for me, I have to exercise every morning. It's just, if I don't exercise, I don't have energy. And so that was my routine, and I had my meal in the morning. And eating, and I'm pretty healthy now, but eating either way makes me tired. Doesn't matter if I eat healthy or unhealthy. My body gets tired after I eat. So I couldn't eat. I couldn't afford the time to be tired. And, I couldn't go to a movie. I didn't go out to eat. I did nothing. If I was on the treadmill, I was, texting and emailing, social mediaing, fundraising requests. And the time change. So when it was kind of nighttime here, and that meant in Taiwan and Japan, where I knew people around the Buddhist world, I was fundraising over there. It was just constant. It was all I did. I didn't really, there was nothing else in my life that existed but securing this property, because I knew the beauty of what we could do with it. Now that we just passed our 6-year anniversary of being there, and I would say, quite honestly, whatever I anticipated we could do, we have far exceeded. And that includes being closed for 18 months during a pandemic,
So talk to us a little bit about the programs you offer now. Yeah. I know Buddha for You is open, and you can shop online. They're always having sales.
Yes,
great sales.
Yes.
And
we have this incredible mahogany coffee table.
Mahogany coffee table. Yeah. If we finish this interview and I'm not the proud owner of a...
Yeah. So should we just announce here that Principal David Shred is the new owner of a beautiful mahogany coffee table? It'll look great in his office. I'm just pointing that out.
I have to measure.
You got millions of listeners here that now are going to come here just to see your coffee table.
There's going to be a run on items at your store.
Yeah.
But you have community events, and you have feeding folks in downtown who are homeless. You've got recovery groups. So talk to us about some of those.
So just to put it into context, what acquiring this building, which again, we moved in April 2017, what it meant was we could bring Buddha for You, the store with the meditation hall, and the Dharma Bum Temple, and all of our programs. Instead of renting in these other locations, we now owned the building. We could bring it all under one roof, right? So Buddha for You, which is now 20 plus years, it's a Buddhist shop, Buddhist statues, Asian art, incense, incredible mahogany wood coffee tables. It's really just a beautiful, we always called it your peaceful place. So it's a gift shop and it's a store, but it also is an opportunity to learn about the history of Buddhism, the art pieces of Buddhism, the teachings behind Buddhism. So it really becomes a place that people can kind of come into and just, roam around for 30 minutes or an hour and look at all the stuff. And it almost acts and feels more like a museum when you walk in there than anything. So that functions downstairs. And yeah, website, you can shop online, all that kind of stuff. Just Google Buddha for You, you'll find it. And the meditation hall in the back there. Then upstairs is the main hall for the Dharma Bum Temple. And the programs we run, in brief, as I mentioned earlier, the Dharma Bum Temple is not one lineage or one sect of Buddhism. We don't have a master, head monks, or nuns. We introduce various schools of Buddhism. So every night we have different lay people leading, meaning non-monks, non-nuns. We have morning meditation every day, Monday through Friday from 8 to 9. It's 2 30-minute meditations. We do free. Everything we do is free. Our evening classes, Monday through Friday, are 7 p.m. Different classes each night, different types of meditation. Our weekends, we have Intro to Buddhism as well, Saturday at 11. And Sunday, we do our recovery groups. So specifically our programs, we have meditation and Buddhist classes. We have a prison outreach program that serves a couple different facilities. We're starting a new juvenile detention facility program as well through Temple. We have our recovery sangha that we started 13 years ago, and that takes meditation, Buddhist practice, and kind of traditional 12-step recovery work and brings them together. That meets just about every day of the week. Some almost all in person, some still virtual with that as well. We have a we call food redistribution program every Thursday, 5 o'clock. We gather food for the most part that would have been wasted or thrown away, or we do peanut butter and jelly, and we gather at the temple Thursday at 5 for about an hour. We prepare sandwiches, and then we go downtown and we feed the people who sleep on the streets every night. So the idea is that we want to just repurpose and move food that maybe would have been thrown away and give it to people who are hungry. So that's been one of our best programs, really. Also, we started that, I think. Well, like I said, that grew out of us eating muffins and scones every day, and every day knowing that there would be more muffins and scones. So we started to pass it out to the people on the streets, and then we got more for us. And that cycle just, here we are 14 years later, and we still feed people who sleep on the streets. So prison outreach, homeless outreach, recovery programs. We have a family group that meets now once a month. It used to be twice, but that's for parents and kids, so the parents can meet together while the kids are downstairs. We have a teenage group that is led by initially myself, but then also from our college kids. So you have college kids that lead the teenage group. Much of this, as everything was put on hold during the pandemic, but we're back for the last year and a half full force, running all our programs. There's one of my favorite new ones that came out of the pandemic was because a lot of our outreach programs were, kind of shut down. We had a Zoom meeting to try to brainstorm like, hey, what are some virtual programs? What could we still do to be of service, even though we can't do what we were typically doing because of COVID? So we started what we call Homeless Hats, Knit and Sit. And now they meet every Sunday afternoon, 3 times on Zoom and once a month at Temple. And it's a group of people, and they just knit hats, like beanies, warm hats. And if you don't know how to knit, they have loom starter kits. Like literally anybody can learn how to knit. If I can learn how to knit, anyone can learn how to knit. And they make hats every week at whatever leisure they want. They meet once a week, but whenever you want. And then as part of our food distribution program, we pass them out with the food every Thursday. They've made over 1,000 hats that have been passed out to people living on the streets. So it's called Homeless Hats, Knit and Sit. We have a new engaged Buddhist program, which really focuses on what Thich Nhat Hanh coined as engaged Buddhism, where you're looking at the social, economic, environmental, political injustice that exists in our world today, and addressing those issues in various ways. So there's a lot. It keeps us busy, and again, it's free, and 98% of the people who come to all these programs are not Buddhist. And pre-pandemic, we would see 600-800 people a week. We see a lot.
How do you oversee, and I don't know if the word monitor is the correct word, but certainly stay abreast of some level of fidelity to the principles of Dharma Bum Temple and Buddhism?
Yeah.
What you just described is a pretty complex team of 100% volunteers. I believe you have a few staff members.
Correct, yeah.
But for the most part, it's volunteer run.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that what is being talked about and taught in these various groups is in keeping with your mission and
Sure.
vision.
Yeah, it's we have probably 80 to 100 volunteers that run all these programs. And I think that two things. First is to understand that everybody who leads, whether they're leading a program or are volunteering at a program, right? So, for example, I'll use Josh and Jessica and Lisa. Josh and Jessica, they've been around, 10, 12 years, longer actually, from the beginning, 2007, 2008. And when they got married and had their first kid, it was really important to them to build a family group. They were parents, they were into meditation, Buddhist practice, and now they had a kid. And so the kid was taking a lot of their time, rightfully so, but they weren't as free to just come to temple all the time. Now they have a newborn. So they wanted to build a community of people that was more built around the family structure. And so over the last 12 years, and then Lisa, who's she's been a special ed teacher forever. She leads our kids group. But the reason I bring up that example to your question of how do you make sure you're still bringing in kind of the Buddhist philosophy and ideals is that the people that run these programs are all coming from people that kind of grew up or have been in and around the Dharma Bum Temple. So the philosophy, the teachings, the ideals, it's already kind of embedded in who they are as what we call practitioners, right? And I mean, they're not saints, they're not nuns, they're not monks. They, screw up and do dumb things just like everybody else, but their intention is really beautiful, right? And if you take that mindset of allowing people to lead programs who really understand the heart and vision and mission of the Dharma Bum Temple, it works really well. Anytime we get people who are like, I'm a teacher and I want to come in and teach stuff, they're the last person that you want leading stuff, because then they're really in it for them, for their own benefit. But when people lead things and it's not about them, like our college group motto is for FTBOO, for the benefit of others, which is what we see as the Bodhisattva, the enlightened practice. And so everybody who leads stuff understands they're not leading it for them specifically. It's for everybody. So that, I think, just kind of happens organically from them being around the temple. But the second part is from the management, overseeing it all. There's a Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, who built San Francisco Zen Center, one of my favorite, if not most favorite teacher, as a Buddhist Zen priest. He wrote he was talking about cattle, and he was saying that if you want to kind of control them, you can't remove the fence and ignore them. But you also can't just always confine them and lock them in. You have to give them room to roam. And you have to observe. And so for me, I've always seen that as my role with the temple is that, I used to use a metaphor of like a bowling alley.
Oh, the bumpers?
The bumpers.
Or
which they didn't have when we were kids. But yeah,
right.
They have the bumpers that come up that block the ball from going down the gutter. And I've always said that my role is just the ball is going to go down the lane and it's going to go side to side. Just make sure it doesn't go down the gutter.
I like that. I might steal that from you.
You're welcome to, yes. And so with that idea of allowing, if you have 80 to 100 people running programs as volunteers and participating, they're all coming in with their own madness. They're all coming in with their own stress, their own anger, their own anxiety, their own sadness, their own depression, but they're there because they want to help and they want to feel happy and they want to be at peace with their lives. So allow them to be. And what that means is it requires, and this is no knock on anybody, tremendous amount of patience, because you have people who are really struggling in a lot of areas of their lives, but they're also stepping up to lead volunteer programs. And that means their struggles are going to come out sometimes in leading volunteer programs. And so, you have to kind of work with that as well. And I think we've done in 17 years, a pretty decent job. Obviously, I've made mistakes and, said or done things I shouldn't have done, or, had interactions with people that I definitely wish would have gone differently. But overall, I'm pretty proud of how we've all, kind of held it together.
And how you made it through COVID too.
And again, how we made it through COVID, 18 months closed, everything virtual, and then opened up. And now we have an in-person temple, fully functional. We're operating at full steam ahead, and We also still have our virtual temple. So now people who were maybe downtown Dharma Bum Temple 10 years ago, now they live in New York or they live wherever. Now they can join our classes. So we've actually built 2 temples, in person and virtual.
It's a beautiful thing. You've been very generous with your time, and I've got one more question for you, and then a surprise question.
Uh-oh.
My question is around meditation.
Yeah.
Simple concept. So damn hard.
Yeah, right?
It's a 2-part question. Why is meditation so hard? And then the second part of it is, what distinguishes the teachings and the practices at Dharma Bum Temple from mindfulness.com? And I use that term broadly, but mindfulness is sexy right now.
Sure.
You know, you can go to Sharp Healthcare and they're going to tell you that mindfulness will lower your blood pressure.
Yes.
Just click this link and there's a course at University of fill in the blank and you can do it. So first part of the question, or maybe we can take them in reverse order. What distinguishes what you do from that? And then what's the value of meditation, but also why is it so hard?
I think, the first thing about why it's so hard is, and I've spent the last 20 years introducing meditation in an incredibly secular manner, as well as meditation in a Buddhist manner. So I've seen both sides, but the first part, why it's so hard, is I think a big part of it is people have unrealistic expectations of what meditation actually is. So what they're thinking is so hard is because they have an idea of what they think they're supposed to accomplish, right? And you've heard me say this a million times. Every time I lead meditation, I always tell people, nothing's going to happen. You're not going to float. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experience. You're not going to shut your mind off. You're not going to go blank. You're not going to think nothing. You're just going to sit and breathe. So once you've removed all these ideas of what you think meditation is supposed to be, that is the first step. Then you're like, oh, okay, I'm just going to sit and breathe. That's not that hard. We do that all day long. What makes it difficult is when you're sitting and breathing and you're silent, what are you left with? You. And what are we spending most of our lives trying to run away from? You. Not you literally, but you know what I mean?
Sometimes.
So we're always trying to run away from our thoughts. So that, to your question, what makes it so hard once people begin to understand what meditation really is it's not stopping the mind or going blank or emptying the mind. It's not, your mind doesn't stop racing. It's learning to be with the racing mind. It's learning to be with the thoughts you don't like or the ideas in your head. It's learning to be with that. That's the hard part. Sitting and breathing, we can sit on a couch, watch Netflix for 7 hours straight, and you're sitting and breathing. But when you turn Netflix off, now you got nothing to watch but your own mind. That's the hard part. And that just takes time. That requires a lot of self-love, a lot of self-compassion, a lot of self-forgiveness, right? That requires us to learn to be okay with present moment, meaning I've done a lot of stuff I shouldn't have done. I've screwed up a lot. I've hurt a lot of people, right? But I can't change that. All I can change is what I'm doing in this present moment and go forward. So, working with the veteran population for so many years, people have gone through PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, things like that. Sitting in silence for a lot of folks is torture. And so you want to be careful with that, but learning to sit in silence for a couple minutes ultimately is really powerful if you can do it. Because it allows you, like a mirror, to just see like, oh, these are my thoughts. This is my mind. Wow, this is a mess. This is terrible. I shouldn't think these things. But that's who we are. So can we be okay with that? And kind of going back to the college group, that's why it's so beautiful, because it's an opportunity for them to express like, wow, this is what I think. So once you get through that, then you realize, okay, I'm just going to sit and breathe. And you do that for like 7 years and see what happens, And then the second part of kind of the difference between the mindfulness movement, I'm a big John Kabat-Zinn, who's the most famous for building MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. He was a Zen student, a Zen practitioner. His master gave him the koan of what is it? This was the story I heard. What is it you can do with this one life that nobody else could do? And so he built, he was an MD. He built, I think he was an MD. He built MBSR to bring meditation, mindfulness, they called it, into the medical community. And he was smart enough to know that the Western world is afraid of the word meditation, so he called it mindfulness. What that has become is this huge, booming mindfulness movement in our country, an expensive, booming mindfulness movement. And I've gone back and forth over the years on my thoughts about it, but my take as of today is, look, and then I'll talk about the difference in a minute, but whatever introduces people to the practice of meditation, I'm all for it. If they want to call it mindfulness, great. If they want to call it painting, great. If they want to call it meditation, I don't care what people call it. I always think it should be free. I don't think you should have to pay thousands of dollars to learn to sit and breathe. But there are people I know who will only do meditation if they pay for some expensive, fancy program. So just because they paid for some expensive, fancy program doesn't mean what they're learning is bad. It means they needed to do that because that says, hey, if I just spent $1,000 on this program, I'm going to commit to it.
Right.
So I have a lot of friends like that. And I think that's great. If that's what they have to do it, then great, go for it. But the mindfulness practice has really caught on, and I'm glad because it's got people interested in learning about meditation. You can call it mindfulness, but it is meditation. And so I personally have spent, as I mentioned earlier, time sharing the secular meditation practices as well as more of the meditation practices coming from kind of a Buddhist lens. Ultimately, what's the difference? Not much. It's a different approach, you know? I mean, I love, as you know, pizza. And you go to
but the wrong kind of pizza.
But the wrong
Chicago deep dish.
I like the best pizza in the world, the
That's
Chicago deep dish pizza. Some people go this like floppy, thin New York
That's
style
called
stuff.
bread pie.
Yeah. So some people like these little pies in New York, little thin sliced stuff. But pizza's pizza. Thin crust, thick crust, New York, Chicago. You want, there's people who hate that they put, Canadian bacon and pineapple, like pineapple on pizza, right? And then there's people who can't believe that you would put like mushrooms on a pizza. So there's all different kinds of pizzas, but ultimately it's still pizza. To me, I think the meditation, the mindfulness movement, it's the same thing. From a Buddhist lens, Karmalekshi Soma is a Tibetan nun. She said years ago, I was doing a talk with her at UCSD, and she said her problem from a Buddhist perspective of the mindfulness movement is that you could mindfully rob a bank, you could mindfully murder somebody. Meaning mindfulness without moral, ethical behavior is not Buddhist practice. So that's where and again, that's a whole other topic for, 3 hours, but that's where there's this very distinct fine line that you can have, and I've heard people say this, you can have meditation without Buddhism. Absolutely. But you can't have Buddhism without meditation. And mindfulness, if you don't have moral and ethical behavior in your life and you're practicing mindfulness, you're going to still end up in a lot of trouble. Meaning an angry, pissed off person that meditates all day long is still just going to be an angry meditator. So you have to really work on the root of that. Yeah.
I told you I was going to mention the Cubs real quick before we get to the
I
final.
thought your surprise was like some championship World Series ring or something.
I wish.
Yeah.
My daughter in 2016, on the night that the Cubs won the World Series,
right?
She had an information meeting planned at a school. So she was in 8th grade, and we had her scheduled for orientation or information nights at all these different schools. And we were hanging out, and I said, Maya, I want to go watch the game.
Right.
And so she had to choose between going to the information night or watching the game. I said, look, you get to choose. And she said, yeah, I'm going to watch the game. The Cubs, it's been a long time, and it may be a long time.
Right.
Until they're back. And so we watched the game. Cubs won the World Series. And because of her not going to the information meeting, she ended up going to a different school, Helix High School, and things turned out great.
Right.
So she would have returned to the high school version of the K-8 school that she'd been in and was her comfort zone. But because of the Cubs, she ended up striking out in a new path.
So Maya, I know you're listening to this, and I want you to know right now, I think it's time that you just set that Yankees hat aside, and I will buy you any Cubs hat that you like. And I think we should, come to the dark side and become a Cubs fan. It's beautiful.
I think she's got Padres first, then Yankees, but then a few other teams that she has an affinity for, and so the Cubs are somewhere on that. And lately they did actually handle her Padres. So
yes, they did. 2 out of 3. But
2 out of 3.
Yeah.
But
so, Maya, I'll get you a Cubs hat anyways. Don't worry.
This has been a fantastic conversation, Jeff.
Yes.
We've covered a lot of ground, and I think for any listeners, but in particular, in education, the inspiration that your work brings in terms of setting audacious goals, wanting to, when you have a dream, and you also have principles that guide you to get from 7,000 to 500,000 in just a couple months, to know that that's possible, and that you did something like that with hundreds of really small donations, or the work that you've done in the community, in prisons, with people who've had traumatic incidents in their lives. That's all just been a motivating thing for me. It's really why I wanted to have you on. So hopefully that good work can permeate out into our listeners. So here's your question. Dharma Bum Temple has the opportunity to rent the Goodyear blimp. And, you can put a message on the side of the blimp.
Okay.
So Jeff gets the opportunity to design the message to the world.
Huh.
What do you put on the side of the Goodyear blimp as it floats over San Diego and or Chicago or wherever else you want
Other
to
than
float?
Go Cubs, I'm assuming.
You can't.
Yes.
You can't. Nothing commercial like that.
Yes.
Other than you can put Go Padres on there. But, what would you put on there that conveys both the importance of the work that you've done, and then where you think we need to go in the future?
Sure. My very first, as soon as you asked that question, the very first thing that popped into my head was be kind. Because I think that's it. It popped into my head, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, but wait, if the sign is scrolling, you could have more letters, Then I flashed into my mom. My mom always said if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all, which is kind of like be kind. But then I understand there's, it's not a message for silence, because we don't necessarily want to be silent at times, but you can still speak up and have a voice and be kind. But I think that to me, that's what it boils down to. And, not just as a message from Dharma Bum Temple or a message from Buddhism but I know from my personal life, like that's why I'm so passionate and motivated through this path and this practice, is because it absolutely 20 years ago transformed my life to this moment. And I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on the past at all anymore. I really don't. But I don't forget all the years growing up that I wasn't kind. And I don't forget all the people that I hurt and harmed or bullied or picked on or was terrible to. So I wasn't kind to other people, but that was because it started with I wasn't kind to myself and didn't like myself. And so then that became an outward expression of not being kind to other people. So which I know you know that world of me very well. But that's what's transformed my life, which started with having to be kind to myself. And once I learned to be kind to myself and have love and compassion for myself, then I was able to, and at the same time, be able to be kind to other people. And it sounds so simple, be kind. But it's super difficult. And I don't mean to be kind just to the people you know and like. Be kind to the strangers, the one who cut you off on the freeway, the one who made your latte the wrong way because you didn't get enough pumps of, vanilla, whatever.
I said 8 pumps,
right?
not 7.
Exactly.
You can't count.
Right. And so we're so quick to just judge and critique and be mad and angry at everybody else. And then there's the people that we don't like, those that have harmed us, those that have harmed others, right? You can still fight for what you believe and have a voice around social injustice, racial injustice, and things like that while being kind. It's absolutely 100% possible. So being kind doesn't mean being weak.
I was going to ask you about that distinction.
Yeah. And there is very, again, when I bring that up, and you can expand on that when I talk on that, but kindness doesn't mean weakness. Kindness doesn't mean that you're a doormat and you let people walk all over you or they abuse you or anything like that. Like there's,
because then you're not being kind to yourself.
Correct. Then you're not being kind to yourself. So by being kind is not, to me, kind is not passive. To me, being kind it's very aggressive. It's very passionate. It's very difficult. It's very challenging. And again, in the simple words of be kind, you don't always get everything we just expressed. It's just 2 words, but I think that's where it starts. Be kind.
Thank you, Jeff. Be kind. That's a great place to end for today. We've coming up almost on 100 minutes, and it felt like it flew by, so we'll have to do a version 2.0 real soon.
I am. In fact, when I deliver your mahogany table, we could structure a time for that.
Or when the Padres are in the World Series, we could have a World Series edition. So
sounds good.
Thank you so much for your time today, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right.
My honor.
This episode is brought to you by McGriff Insurance Services and Senior Vice President Mike Lutosky. For over a century, McGriff has focused on building long-term relationships to deliver innovative insurance solutions. The McGriff name dates back to 1886 and the founding of McGriff, Sables, and Williams. Today, McGriff is part of Truist Insurance Holdings, Inc., one of the top 10 largest insurance brokers in the world. McGriff provides highly consultative risk management and insurance solutions for businesses of all sizes, as well as for personal insurance needs. Coverages available include commercial property and casualty, small business, employee benefits, management liability, personal lines, and much more. Mike Lutosky's expertise is wide-ranging and includes transitioning employers from fully insured to partially self-funded medical, dental, and vision programs, HRA wrap programs, reference-based pricing, healthcare pricing transparency, pharmacy consulting, wellness programs, marketing, implementation, and ongoing management of fully insured benefit plans, and much more. Mike can be reached on his cell phone at 619-925-1731. All proceeds from this sponsorship support the Eric C. Mitchell Scholarship Fund at Albert Einstein Academies. The scholarship benefits graduates who exemplify the outstanding human qualities that define Mr. Mitchell's legacy. Thank you for listening to the Superintendent's Hangout. You can follow me on Twitter at DVS1970. Please be sure to share this show with friends and family on social media and in the real world. Thank you to Brad Bacayal for editing and production assistance, and to Tina Royster for scheduling and logistics. Thanks for hanging out, and have a great day.